We all build technology, and there's always a shiny thing coming up. There's AI, there's machine learning, now there's robotic process automation.
So we want the computers to do the mundane things that we don't want people to do, or the things that computers are good at.
When you think about RPA, if everybody wanted to be tremendously conservative, then you would move at a snail's pace. And so you have to get people comfortable. And, I'm actually willing to take a little bit of risk to get some results.
It doesn't matter if you can build the greatest technology in the world, right? It doesn't matter if you've got this revolutionary AI tool. There's much more to adoption of AI in government than just the technology.
When we talk about health data, we need to be focused on social determinant data, biomedical device data, over time, genomic, proteomic data, imaging data, et cetera, because that's where you're going to really get the source and capability to really drive the insights with things like AI and machine learning, et cetera.
I think this does have the potential to be much like the Industrial Revolution and the impact that had on the country and the world, really.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to our Future of RPA virtual event as part of our AI and Gov virtual series. My name is Michael Hoffman, and I'm the president of Government CIO Media and Research. Government CIO Media and Research is the leading solution resource in federal IT. We're excited this morning to welcome some of the top experts in RPA from federal agencies such as the Defense Department, Department of Veterans Affairs, IRS, GSA, and the Department of Labor, to name a few. We're put them together to talk about issues such as business practices, the growing federal RPA community of practice, and the exciting new opportunities RPA is offering. We want our virtual events to be as interactive as possible, so I want to encourage everyone watching to take part in the conversation, both on social media and on the video player you see below. You can join the conversation on social media utilizing the Digital CIO hashtag. In the video player, the box below the video player, as you can see, you can enter questions there, which our editors will then collect and pass on to our moderators, including myself. Finally, I wanted to highlight a new feature we've been introducing to our virtual events. For our business processes panel with the IRS, VA, and DoD, we'll have Wade Forbes illustrating or sketchnoting the discussion. And with that, let's get started. We're excited to cover this topic because RPA is quickly spreading through many of the federal agencies. And as part of our mission over at Government CIO Media and Research, we want to cut down those silos as best as we can and make sure that everyone in leadership positions for those agencies understand what everyone else is doing in the government. So we thought the best way to kick that off would be to start with a fireside chat with somebody who's doing just that. Gerard Budorick. He's the Chief Financial Officer of GSA and notably the executive sponsor for the GSA Community of Practice, which was started in 2019. Welcome, Gerard. Thank you for joining us. So Gerard is the Senior Financial Executive at GSA. He's responsible for the management of his $30 billion budget and over 500 financial personnel. Gerard oversees all financial functions and activities. Since joining GSA in December of 2014, he has completed a comprehensive transformation of the GSA finance organization. Before joining GSA, Gerard worked at both Xerox and MCI Communications. He served as the Senior Vice President for Xerox before joining GSA. Welcome, Gerard. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
All right, well, let's start with the community of practice. As I talked about in the introductory remarks, this has served as a great vehicle for helping teach a lot of federal agencies and a lot of folks across government just exactly the opportunities and the capabilities, I should say, with RPA. So could you start there and talk a little bit about how the community of practice came together?
Yeah, so the community of practice was started a couple of years ago out of GSA. And when we saw all the agencies were attempting to get started in RPA, and some had reached out to us, but we thought the best way to share knowledge across the government was to create this community of practice. So it was created with that in mind, both for knowledge sharing and also to address some of the common challenges that we have between agencies.
Okay. What is some of the impact that you've seen in government since the start of it?
Yeah, so, in the last year, the biggest impact that I've seen is the collaboration that we've been able to build between agencies. And what's interesting is, you talk about teamwork and you talk about communication, but that has to be the biggest accomplishment over the last year. And this collaboration can be used with other technologies, but it really is bringing agencies and leaders together to help collaborate and share ideas and work with each other. It's when I think about the federal government, we're really a big corporation, and really the secret to effective and efficient progress is working together, whether it's DoD and civilian agencies, or whether it's the large cabinet agencies and smaller agencies. And we're doing that today with the community of practice. In the last year, we've had to revert to webinars with the mandatory telework. So since April of 2020, we've held 28 webinars attended by over 7,000 employees and an average of 250 a session. And the webinars really are about discussions and questions and sharing information between different agencies.
Okay. Well, certainly in government and big corporations at large as well, sometimes what's new or new opportunities and new technologies aren't always, newly received, especially something with RPA, which not as many folks, know about. So how has the community of practice really been able to encourage the adoption of RPA and just really understand the benefits that it provides?
Yeah, so, I think it starts with we've identified programs that have been more successful and have been in RPA longer, and we have programs that are in the startup mode, and we're really oriented towards sharing some of the applications and sharing some of the practices of agencies. And when you're in an agency and you can actually turn to the community of practice or hear what's going on at DoD or at DLA or at agencies like NASA and USDA and GSA, it excites you to understand where they are, what they're doing, how they've been able to accelerate RPA. So that example to the agencies is very important. One of the things that we had done last year that we're now going to repeat is a use case inventory. So we, in the first use case inventory the community practice put together, we had just over 300 use cases. And the use cases describe the application. They identify the agency that has it. They identify the function, whether it's HR, acquisition, finance. And so we have just are now going through the process of updating that, and we're going to have over 800 in the use case inventory this year. So if you think about that, an agency that wants to start out with some finance applications can actually look and see what are some applications, what are some that might be easier to start with, who are some of the agencies that are doing this. So we're really hoping to have all of these identified across finance, acquisitions, HR, and be able to share that within the agency. And then obviously we've tried to make it as easy as possible with roadmaps and playbooks and documentation as well that helps agencies to progress in RPA.
That's an incredible engagement to go from 300 to 800 use cases already, with just a few years under our belt for the community of practice. Did you expect this level of engagement when you first started the COP?
I was hopeful, but the key is having sessions and products of value that are meaningful to other agencies, and that's what we really strive for. And it's not just GSA that does that. We've got a management committee and the community of practice, engaged leaders, and they're all part of how do we make this progress in the federal government. The webinars have been a good example of how we've been able to accelerate that. The use cases, we're actually talking about, we're implementing office hours twice a month. When we have a webinar and we don't get through all the questions, we set up a subsequent session, a hot topic session, and we have no presentation. It's just questions and answers. And so it's really all about helping agencies to be successful in their RPA journey. But as I was saying earlier, this concept can be applied to any new idea, any technology, sharing of information across agencies. Because I think the really big thing that we're demonstrating is the level of collaboration and teamwork we can build across the federal government.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the use cases, were there any that really stood out to you as you took a look at the many that occurred throughout government?
Yeah, I mean, there many of them have been written about, but there are some remarkable ones, but the ones that the ones that really that I think are going to make a difference are those that can be used by all agencies, and we have one on contractor validation that the IRS originally thought of the idea, but it's GSA. We've also developed the automation. The code has been shared with other agencies, but it's an application that all agencies need to do as part of the procurement process. So ideally, we'd like to, while we're sharing it within agencies, we're really looking to identify that government-wide type of automation that can be used by all agencies. Because we don't have one platform for the government right now, it has to be done separately within agencies. But there, more ideas will come out of this, but also RPA is some of the basic blocking and tackling. The finance organizations, HR organizations impose requirements, and other parts of the agency. For example, GSA, we've got an automation associated with processing credit card transactions, which just frees up the business owners to do a little bit less work in that process. And that process is required by the finance organization. But what we're doing is automating that and making it easier for those business owners.
Okay. Well, last year, the Community of Practice released a maturity matrix for RPA. What does the assessment tell us about the current state of RPA in government and where it's going?
Okay. Yeah, the maturity matrix is to me is very interesting, because what we tried to do was identify the attributes of highly successful RPA programs, and then set some measures. And last year, originally when we had 4 levels. Last year we expanded to 5, so always raising the bar a little bit. But when we look at the maturity matrix, just from fiscal year 19 to 20, in fiscal year 19 we had 17 of the 23 RPA programs we studied at level 1. Now, 8 of those have moved beyond level 1. In 19, we had 3 programs in level 3 and none in level 4. Now we have 5 that are in level 4. So we've seen significant improvement, and the measures that we have in the maturity matrix, we've got 4 broad categories, and the first is really about measurable outcomes. So the maturity matrix is really about whether agencies are making progress, how many automations do you have in production, how much of a capacity benefit do you have. Secondly, we look at the scope of the program and the demand. Are you doing it just in one function or across the agency? And then we also look some at the development capacity of the technology and the program capabilities. One of the important things that we've realized is part of the RPA program is process reengineering and improvement. So that's now become a focus of RPA as well, because you want to automate the best process. And in some cases, we've actually improved processes and not needed to automate. So it's the maturity matrix has criteria. It's a point system, and I know today that agencies are actually looking at where they rank in the maturity matrix and what they need to do to move up among the different levels of the matrix.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask, are there any specific themes that jumped out to you which led to certain agencies being further advanced in that maturity matrix?
Yeah, it's a point system, outcomes, in addition to like the program capabilities. If you've got process reengineering and improvement as part of your RPA solution, that's one of the criteria. If you're managing a pipeline of opportunities and a pipeline of development applications, that's also another criteria. So we actually have, as you evolve, different stages to each of these criteria, and agencies score points based on where they are. And I'm hoping to see 23 programs level 5 in the federal government at some point here very soon. So,
wow. I mean, how fast have you seen changes over these past 2 years, within that maturity?
Well, what's interesting is if you just look at the number of automations from 19 to 20, we saw 110% increase in automations.
Wow.
Almost 200% in capacity. The average hours of benefit per automation, and it's not always about creating capacity, but has gone up by probably 30%. So it's in the maturity matrix, and the maturity matrix is used. We used it in a report called the State of Federal RPA, and there we identified the level 4 agencies. We categorized everybody into the different categories. Didn't always identify that, but it was remarkable progress in the federal government, but I think the potential is even higher. So I'm really looking forward to what the report will be at the end of this fiscal year, because RPA is really alive and being driven in the federal government. Agencies are excited about it. There are different approaches between agencies, but that's something that we talk through. We have one approach at GSA that does not necessarily work for all agencies, and it's just terrific to see the level of communication, collaboration, and teamwork that's going on today with the community of practice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the flip side, I was going to ask about the challenges that you've seen. Are there specific challenges that COP is working on right now to address to further evangelize RPA and spread it even further?
So it's interesting when a technology comes out, everybody spends time on the technology and what it's about, right? But implementing new technology is more than flipping switches or installing software, and really change management is one of the really big things. Having employees that understand the technology, creating innovation champions, and those are all very important. But the change management and dedicated executive leadership are critical to this, and it's really the technology is there, but what it takes to come up with ideas and to create demand, that's part of technology. And creating that demand and getting functional leaders within an agency excited about RPA and willing to dedicate some of their time and the time of their organizations to supporting what's needed to implement RPA. And a lot of that is process improvement and optimization. So we spend and that's another focus and a challenge area for the community of practice. But we're actually we actually are working on a playbook for process optimization that's part of RPA that we're going to put out there. But those are probably a couple of the bigger challenges that we face right now, getting that commitment to change management and creating the demand and the follow through you need so that you have an opportunity that you can hand off to your development team to implement.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess I wouldn't have thought of the process optimization element of it, when it comes to RPA necessarily right off the bat. But that's interesting that's a big part.
Yeah, yeah. In RPA, it's you've got to document every step in the process, and one of the things you have to look at is what are the best steps. And I can tell you that there have been automations that have implemented that cut across organizations of let's say 100 staff. And they're all doing things a bit differently. Or in some agencies, you have regions that have the same responsibility, but they have a different process for getting there. So if you want to do RPA, you have to get everyone to select the best process, and that's the process that you implement. So there's work on that, but in addition to the documentation, you're actually thinking about how does this process work the best and most effectively and efficiently.
Okay. Well, you mentioned a potential optimization playbook. The COP did release a RPA playbook back in 2020, January of 2020. Have you seen any major impacts there since releasing that playbook?
Well, we've gotten the feedback we've received, and it's been internationally and state and local governments and just individuals that have had access to it have really commented on how it is helping them. But the neat thing about the playbook is it is oriented towards which stage you're in, so you can understand what you need to do and how you need to do it. And we've been we'll be adding sections to that playbook and updating it over time. But it is as we learn more, we are doing things through webinars, but we also will be providing updates to the playbook and the process transformation report playbook is one that will be a separate product, but is part of the overall RPA playbook.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know that just speaking with some other federal leaders, that playbook has been just a huge resource for them in terms of, gaining, support for it and just using it as an educational piece. Just to move over to, driving that large scale adoption, is there key requirements that you have seen thus far that have led to that large scale adoption in the government space?
We're still working on the large scale adoption in the federal government, and I can tell you that if you think about if in the private sector you were a new company with a new product and you're trying to introduce it and get customers, right? So you would have an approach where everybody would probably do everything. You were out there and you were hand-holding your customers and clients and trying to understand what the product could do and how to market it and all of that. So this is a startup company, new technology. You've started to introduce it, but then I think what you have to think about now is think about these multi-billion-dollar corporations and the way that they sell. They have a sales and marketing team. they have a business development team that works with a potential customer and says, let's look at some opportunities. And then when they actually close the sale of this product, they have to go in and develop the solution. That's a process optimization. So, and then you've got the actual, either the manufacturing facility or the development. So rather than centers of excellence, I like to talk about factories that produce automation. So if you want to do large scale adoption, I think we have to think about whether it's RPA or any technology, that type of approach. What's going to drive the demand, sales of the product? Get your business development organization in there to actually close out the details of the order or the contract, and then come up and work through the solution. Develop the solution, and then obviously you've got to think about how you maintain and operate that solution going forward. So that's, if you really think about getting robust in these new technologies, that's how the federal government or any large corporation needs to think about this.
Okay. Well, for a large portion of the community of practice, its existence has been in this remote environment, since, with COVID, and some people are going back to the offices now, but a good portion has been people working from their homes. Has that uncovered new opportunities within RPA as part of that, as you guys?
Yeah, in terms of the COP opportunity, it's been interesting to see the evolution, because we, when I talked about the webinars, we originally started with one webinar a week, but we settled on probably two a month. And the interesting about the webinars is when we first started, when you would have a speaker talking about something, you were not sure how engaged the audience was in the topic. But where we've evolved is these webinars that have lots of questions, high levels of attendance, and interest in solving problems, and then follow-up sessions to address those problems. And I actually think that relative to the in-person sessions we used to do, it's a lot easier for a government employee to say, okay, there's an hour that I have scheduled for this webinar. I'm going to go join that and learn about this and get some of my questions answered. If you thought about an in-person thing, they'd have to say, okay, how do I get to the GSA facility or wherever I need to go? It's time to get there. And then I get there, and then I'm sitting in an audience with 150 people. Do I get my questions answered? So that dynamic has changed. So I think these webinars are here to stay for the RPA COP. We'll continue to do we'll start doing in-person events, but it's been remarkable to see how that's changed and how we've been able to use that as a way to share knowledge and to collaborate across the federal government. What we're hoping for is that in addition to the webinars, relationships are developed outside of the webinars, where agencies can work with each other or have discussions and helping to solve some of the challenges that are being faced.
Well, we have about a minute left. The last question I wanted to ask you is, what's next for the community of practice? What are some of your priorities? I know you mentioned a playbook for optimization, process optimization, posting more of those use cases, but are there any other priorities that you wanted to inform the audience about as the
the use case will be a big deal for us. The process playbook will be a big deal. I think strengthening the communication between agencies, and also across different levels, because I think it's very important that leadership understands and agencies understands the potential of RPA and what it can do. So we're probably going to more aggressively communicate. One of the things that we've done is we've engaged industry in some of our sessions. We've had a couple different companies come in and talk about their RPA programs and how they're structured. So we're trying to learn from some of the leading private sector companies, and we also have involved industry in some of these discussions, and then increasing that collaboration once we have these webinars is going to be a big benefit as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, Gerard, it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. It's been exciting too. I remember about 2 years ago, we had you join us for an in-person AI event, and the community of practice was just getting started. So it's been really exciting to see what's come of it, and just the amount of engagement that you've gotten from all the federal agencies. So congratulations on that to you and your entire team, because it's been really impressive to see so far.
Yeah, the ability to work with our agencies, this is really an exciting part of what I do. It's a small piece, but it's just a lot of fun to see the success that agencies are having, and seeing agencies sharing information and knowledge and helping each other out with accelerating the RPA. So thank you very much. My pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Gerard. Up next, we're going to have a panel that will include speakers from the IRS, Defense Department, as well as the VA, to talk about ways in which RPA is improving business processes. So look forward to that. And it'll be moderated by our Senior Vice President, Aaron Mirsky. Thank you.
I think about, the data channels that we open with surveys or with a new contact center. It's almost like you turn the faucet of information on, but if you don't have sort of the back-end business processing and training and routing and integration and that infrastructure set up, you're going to run into a whole host of problems.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel, Getting to Better Business Processes Using RPA. As Mike Hoffman mentioned, it's been really amazing seeing all of our panels evolve over the last few years with RPA technology. We have a great panel today. I'm really excited for you to hear from the different agencies, things that they've been sharing with me so far as we've been prepping and talking about RPA technology. This group is going to share information about their selection process, where they are in their journey, how centers of excellence are working, and how RPA is working both internally to support the employees and workforce of their agencies, as well as how RPA is impacting their missions. And so I'm really excited to kick it off and introduce everyone. So joining us today, we have Carrie Lee. She's the Senior Technical Advisor for Project Special Forces with the DevSecOps team at the VA. Welcome.
Thank you.
We have Harrison Smith. He's the co-director for the Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office at the IRS, a new office that's really stepping out and introducing a lot of great technology advances, as well as Erica Thomas. She's the RPA Program Manager with the Department of Defense. Great to have everyone on. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Aaron Mirsky, an SVP at Government CIO. So to kick things off, we're going to ask everyone a little bit about how each of you are, what your organizations are doing with RPA and how you are aiming to improve processes and technologies. We're going to start off first with Erica and hear how the DoD is tackling that.
Great. Thanks for having me. So from my perspective, I am in DoD Comptroller, and just to level set, DoD is so big. We have a lot of different RPA programs going on across DoD. So I don't want people to think that it's just Comptroller. There are a lot of other really good players as well. What we've done is we've stood up a Center of Excellence, starting originally 3 years ago from a little pilot looking into RPA. Now we have a Center of Excellence that offers two primary things. One of them is a shared service platform hosted on AWS GovCloud, allowing other DoD organizations connect in and more easily use RPA. So we have UiPath Orchestrator, we have Automation Anywhere Control Room, potentially other tools as use cases come up. But how did we really wanted to have a platform that eases the barriers of entry for other groups in DoD to start looking at this technology and start using that. So first offering is a shared service platform as part of the Center of Excellence. And then we also have a small group of developers where we'll identify automation ideas that make sense for comptroller to go after for a variety of reasons. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about assessment of those later. But so two primary things, we have a platform as a service, and we also have a small group of developers that goes after specific automations that we have within DoD. And we're really looking at RPA as a force multiplier. So how do we use this to help simplify and improve our overall business processes? We have more than enough to do. Frankly, I think a lot of the agencies feel that way. So how can we use this technology to get rid of some of that standard mundane tasks and move on to some of those higher value, more cognitive type tasks?
Absolutely. And from the IRS perspective, the data analytics and automation opportunities and challenges are robust. Harrison, how are you approaching this for the IRS?
Thanks, Erin. I think that, started kind of my focus in this effort when I was with procurement. For some time, I was the Deputy Chief Procurement Officer. And looking at the number of times that we asked folks, especially in the fourth quarter when the work was already pressing enough as it is, to do manual repetitive tasks, some of which were publicly available sets of information, right? There was a point at which we asked the 1102 folks within IRS to not only get to somewhere between 30 and 40% of their work in the fourth quarter, but to look at literally thousands of transactions over the course of a year, take a publicly available number and type it into multiple publicly available websites, right? And then download publicly available sets of information to help document the file. And it got to the point where it became incredibly obvious the amount of time that we used to perform that task was not only something that could be, to Erica's point, could be shifted from low value work to high value work, is the previous PMA nomenclature. But also it's just empirically a fact that as you do something over and over again, you literally become less productive doing it. Your brain kind of shuts off. You don't realize what you're doing. You just keep on going. Did I do it for that contract? I don't remember. So, looking at it in terms of data entry and those types of things was really what started to open my eyes to the automation space. And now shifting into enterprise digitalization and case management, looking at, for instance, if we have documents which are digitized, and to us that means no machine readable data, how do I get machine readable data out of that without requiring somebody to pick up a sheet of paper, look at it, and type it into a system, right? Sometimes that's necessary depending on the scope, but we want to make sure we're being intentional about that. Conversely, if we have pieces of paper that reside either digitally or in physical form somewhere, how do we make sure those things get to the right place, right? And so the ability to test hypotheses and find out what is a good way to approach activities, I think is fundamentally different within the automation space, right? You can couple machine learning, you can couple those types of things with RPA and OCR, and fundamentally be able to drive activities and to drive access to information that is just not always been possible before in this space. So it's a really neat area. And I think that if you get to the point of where do you use the single most important resource that you have, the people on the team, where do they spend the bulk of their time where it doesn't add a whole lot of value? Where do they not really enjoy their jobs? Oh, I have to transfer this spreadsheet over again. Talk about the value that generates. What's the value proposition for a contracting officer? It's not to bang a publicly available number into multiple websites. It's to make a good business deal on behalf of the government. It's to engage with industry. And so really focusing on that value proposition and honing in on those types of things.
What I like about what you and Erica are both sharing, it's that human-centered design approach and how you look at the individual, which is such an important part of making technology work, not just the technology. And that's a great segue into talking about our veterans, because there's been a great focus on human-centered design and a great digital experience for veterans. And VA is really out in front making great progress on that. Carrie, you want to share a little bit more about how your team and the VA are approaching this? And, I think that human element really feeds nicely into the VA's mission.
Right, and what we're trying to do at VA is to optimize our processes through RPA to make an impact that will be seen by veterans. So we have a couple of programs using RPA within VA right now, and I can give you the example of one. We have a mail automation program that's using a combination of artificial intelligence and natural language processing and RPA. So it's through basically for benefits claims that are mailed into the VA, they're scanned in, and then using OCR and the natural language processing, the veteran information is identified, and then RPA is used to establish the claim for veterans. And this allowed claim establishment to drop from 10 days to 1 day. And it also allowed the claims agents that were working on that claims establishment to actually move to higher value work where they're processing the claims. So veterans are seeing their claims processed much more quickly due to RPA. Another use case helped us with COVID. So during COVID, we had to do a lot of community consults. So that's when we send veterans out to community care providers to get seen. And previously, it would be a lot of manual labor associated with that, like faxing data back and forth. And then it takes time when the faxes come in to get them into the right file, because it was a huge manual process. So we ran a pilot at a few medical centers, and they developed a QR code for consults now. And so when things are sent over to community care provider, the first page has that QR code. And when it comes back in, RPA is used to identify that veteran and immediately get those patient community care consults into their files. And so it saved, just in 3 medical centers, approximately 22,000 hours of year of time that would be spent inputting that information. So we're seeing huge value in RPA in being able to serve veterans, especially during this time of COVID, and needing to get test results out faster and needing to get medical files updated much more quickly.
Those are great examples. And I love that you have the measures and the results. I'm sure that people who are thinking about RPA or trying to figure out where to start, can really lean in and hear how the VA is getting those results and able to measure them. One thing that you mentioned, and I think you have in common with the other panelists, is how that teams are using agile processes like pilots and MVPs and quick start and failing fast ways in order to tackle these, to try new things out. And so, Harrison, a question for you on IRS. How does the selection process work? How are you making the decisions on where to start? And I know Carrie mentioned pilots. You're very keen on pilots as well. Share a little bit more about that selection process.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. I think one of the primary points here is that sometimes those of us in the business offices get focused on a particular tool or solution, right? And I constantly remind myself and the folks that I work for, hey, we have a set of people who are really good at this, and it's their responsibility and authority, and they're called the CIO, right? so making sure that you've got the partnership there, because there's times when you have very simple and straightforward transactions, again, like the ones that I mentioned using publicly available information, where the level of risk is pretty low, right? And the level of investment by other parties is negligible. And to your question about, where do you start? I say start there. I say start at the lowest possible threshold, assuming that you can get information in a corresponding period of time, right? So if you say, I wonder if I can get, to use the example that I was talking about, I wonder if I can get one of those websites and the PDF downloads. I wonder if I can do that. I know I need to get 3 or 4 more others, and I know I need to generate a memo, but let me just start there. Let me just start with doing that function. And if you're able to figure out in a couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks, okay, this is what works well. This is what didn't work well. Now let me add this next website. Let me add the next website. Let me ask the user what they're trying to do. Because I think to me, that's one of the, there's a phrase that sometimes used, the democratization of technology, right? I think in this space, you really get to, it has nothing to do with what Harrison Smith, thinks is the best application for RPA. What does the user need and what benefits the taxpayer and the customer? When you start looking at those types of things and start talking about, throughput, like Carrie was talking about the throughput of forms, right? The customer doesn't care how we do that. The customer doesn't care if we hired 150 people to do something. They care of the benefit that they're receiving. And when you get down to those things, one of our responsibilities in this place is what's our metric for success, right? How are we able to decide what we're going to invest in? And one of the ways that we've done that in this space, and not just around automation, but for that as well, is how can I figure out whether or not this actually generates an ROI? And if I can't figure out what my ROI is going to be in 30 to 120 days, I've got enough other use cases, like Erica said, right? There's tons of these things, enough other use cases to really generate and drive that forward. And to have that platform and that understanding of, hey, this is how we're going to look at the benefit. This is how we're going to look at the value proposition. And from our perspective, it's really been getting more access to machine readable data, accelerating the throughput of forms and correspondence, and storing things more digitally. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but going back to who's the expert in this space. The expert is the user, the expert is the taxpayer, and how it benefits them, and incorporating that cycle of feedback quickly, right? Because you don't want to wait 6 months or 6 quarters to figure those things out. If you can figure those out in 6 days, let's start really small. And even if we're only 50% sure, 70% sure, great. Stephen Blank had a great quote on Twitter, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and I'll get it somewhat wrong here, but he said, the performance engine is where you can't be failing. You have to be succeeding. It's not safe to fail there. And in the innovation engine, you are guaranteeing and providing an opportunity to fail well and fail quickly. And I think it's 2 different spaces that you're there. You find those low-hanging fruits, so to speak, that MVP, that pilot, that helps you try and test and improve early and quickly.
Those are great examples and approaches. Erica, from the DoD enterprise ecosystem that is so massive and where lives are at stake, how do you sort through the selection process and where to start?
Yeah, my advice for groups just getting started is really just to identify a good use case. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to have a good output, right? A good success story that you can sell to leadership and explain this was the benefit that we obtained, and then you can build your program from there. I know some groups have built, a full center of excellence and then gotten started. But for me, it's really just pilot. The whole point of this technology is it's supposed to be faster than normal IT development, right? So instead of waiting a year for a formal system change request to go in, maybe you have, a short-term, temporary, or even a long-term solution that can be put in place with RPA versus, a formal IT change. So again, just identify a good opportunity space, and I joke, I'm comptroller, I'm at the OSD level. I don't have a lot of standard repetitive. I'm a paper pusher, policymaker. I'm not doing a lot of that. So it really does narrow the focus that you've got to get this into the hands and the sight of the end users. So who are those groups of people that are performing those tasks on a daily basis that are, mind-numbing and just repetitive, that maybe freeing up their time will allow them to focus on other things. So for us, really finding those use cases has been reaching out to various groups, kind of doing a marketing campaign of, this is what RPA is, this is what it can do. Do you guys have potentially ideas? So we have a formal process for groups to submit automation ideas to us. And then we have an assessment process that we go through. Not everything is suitable for RPA, and we'll get some ideas that run the gamut from, the idea is, the solution is, let me show you how to use Excel, you don't need RPA for this, to, that's a really great idea, but that actually goes beyond just RPA. Maybe that's looking also into machine learning and AI and other technology. So, we have, again, a formal intake process where we'll assess those opportunities and try to get at, to Harrison's point, what is the return on effort? What is going to be the outcome that we'll get, or the department will get from these automations? And that ultimately helps us to determine what we're going to go after. Now, for us, we also balance workloads. So maybe, there's a complexity score. So if something is very complicated, it's going to take a lot of our developers' time. Maybe we're doing a mixture of, we've got, 2 really complicated ones and a couple of non-complicated ones, or more simplistic ones. So we try to not only look at the outcome, but also balancing the workload and the sustainment efforts of the team as well.
I really like that there's a process where people can submit ideas and get that level of engagement. And if they see something, they can put it forward. That's a great avenue for engaging with employees and getting feedback. Sometimes we get very tunnel visioned on, what we think the right things to do are. And I think it's fantastic, to engage with employees. So at the VA, Carrie, I also know that you're standing up a center of excellence to engage across all the different various business units. What are you hoping to achieve with that? And tell us a little bit more about that journey to stand up a new COE.
Okay, so at VA, we've noticed the value of RPA, as I've discussed earlier, with those various projects that have implemented within their programs. And due to this and our need to serve veterans and wanting to optimize processes and modernize, we decided we will stand up a center of excellence with central governance and security over RPA. So we, like Erica mentioned, we started with the MVP. So we partnered with our IT resource management division, who had some RPA use cases that they wanted to work with, and we created a pilot. The pilot actually is almost done testing and almost ready for production, which is very exciting for us. But we worked with them to figure out how this would work at VA, because when you start working with RPA, it's different than creating a new system. So we have to look at different processes and procedures for certain items, such as ATOs. And so our Center of Excellence will have a platform that's ATO that will help enable use quickly of RPA. In addition, we are learning from other agencies. We're participating in the community of practice that GSA runs. We're also working with GSA's technology transformation services to get some help from people with experience implementing RPA at agencies to help, so we can learn from them and we can do things much more faster at VA with setting up this Center of Excellence.
The DoD has had a Center of Excellence for a little while now. So Erica, what is the future? What are some of the next steps for a more mature COE?
So I think for our Center of Excellence, similar, I think, Carrie, to what you guys are going towards of having kind of that one platform that's ATO'd, that's really kind of what we wanted to do. If anybody's ever been involved in the ATO process, it's not fun. You know, I'm an accountant by trade. I'm masquerading as an IT program manager at this point. But, you know, my exposure so far to ATOs and all that entails in DoD particularly has not been fun. So it's not, you know, it's a pretty labor intensive process. So if we can have a platform that's stood up, approved, and the collective, if they want, we're not mandating, you know, can come in and easily start using RPA and make that an easier process, that's what we want to do. So, you know, right now I mentioned earlier, we have UiPath and Automation Anywhere both on our platform. If there are additional use cases that potentially support other RPA products or the like, we want to potentially consider those. But really, I think it's just maturing our platform and seeing if there are additional offerings that we can add to really remove any remaining barriers. So, you know, while we have a platform for, you know, the central hubs, the orchestrators, the control rooms, we still do have tie-ins to all the many DoD networks. So, you know, for people to use those softwares, they still have to get, you know, the software approved and making sure that it can be installed on those different network computers. So we're really looking at kind of the larger ecosystem to see, are there any other barriers that we can help remove with our platform. Potentially, could we start hosting automations in the cloud versus on the individual networks? All things we still have to dive into. I'm excited about those because, again, the more roadblocks that we can remove in DoD, the more additional groups can come up with great ideas and just get started.
Those sound like some big challenges to tackle. But I think I'm hearing the cybersecurity challenges and how you guys are working through those, and those are not easy things. In the IRS office in particular, Harrison, your office is nearly a year old now, and I know that you've been focused on, how do you test these RPA capabilities? How are you going to measure them? Share more about the environments that you're standing up to on-ramp these new technologies and capabilities.
Oh, thanks, Erin. There's some joke here to be made about not quite being a year old and having trouble sleeping through the night, or sitting up by myself, but I don't know what it is. No, but I mean the point that you've got in regards to the platform and the framework, right? I think this is a very interesting conversation, given what Erica and Carrie have both shared, is that they're in order to make the investment in those broader platforms and the ATO processes and all these kinds of things, in order to make that feasible, you've got to be able to demonstrate that return on investment, right? And so just quantifying what that is in and of itself is a challenge, but also looking at what's the business process on the back end of that, right? How do you create that virtuous circle where if you just create, if you just use automation to change a backlog from analog paper into digital paper, that doesn't fix the issue, right? That doesn't address the veteran's need, right? So we look at not only the technology piece, which, to be honest, is frequently the easiest part, right? No matter how difficult that may be, you've got the policy piece, you've got the ATO piece, you've got what do you do with the paper after you scan it, right? And use automation to get it to the right place. So that throughput piece and the business process piece is hugely important. And I think, just to elaborate, if I may, on Erica's point about creating what we call a virtuous circle, right? If you start small enough and generate value, not only do you generate that value, but you learn how you could have done it better. Right? And if you can do that in the 30, 60, 90-day time frame, even if it means, oh, this is a horrible idea to go off with first because it's going to take me 3 years, you put that aside and say, okay, where's my near term? I need to have a near term, which we call incremental. I need to have a midterm, which we call adjacent. And I'm going to have long term, which is what we call transformative in our office. And so having that near term inform, right, and be governed by the adjacent and the transformative, right, that midterm and the long term, is so hugely important because it creates that virtuous circle, not only of bandwidth and learning and resources, but it helps you use the lessons learned and the mistakes, right, and the best practices to ultimately adapt and shift where you're going to be in the midterm and the long term. So it just feeds itself in this cycle, and it's wildly important. It is something that you have to have conversations about internally. The government space is fundamentally different in many places, but one of them is how we quantify and characterize failure. To me, if you find out very quickly something works or doesn't work, and you expend not a whole lot of resources on it, I'd much rather do that than spend 6 months or a year or 18 months providing an analysis on, for instance, the 1,429 forms that the IRS has, right? If I know that I've got 50 that I want to look at in the space, and all 50 of those are pretty strong answers, pretty strong use cases, not to be too flippant about it, but pick one, right? Can you get a quick feedback in that space? Do you think you have a good ROI? And then you can move forward. Just because it's not the top one or the top three, if it's the top 8, you're still generating positive return on investment. You're still learning, and it's helping you inform in a quicker, and frankly, more foundationally sound manner how you're going to get there at the end of the day. I think there's a tendency to say, I want to make sure I get a lot of really smart folks in a broom closet, and we're going to go off and not talk to anybody about this and be the best at it. I think many of you heard Gerard Beredek in the past, in the previous segment, talk about talking to industry, talking to people who've done this before, who are in different places than you. That's a wildly, wildly important activity that we're definitely pursuing in many spaces.
One thing that all of you have talked about, and I'm going back to that human-centered design focus and the people that you work with, how do you create that safe environment to fail as leaders? How do you breed that culture? Everyone is very focused on their missions and public service and getting products out the door. But as leaders, I'd be curious how you create that environment culturally in your workspace? Harrison, maybe.
Sure.
Tackle that.
It's 3 words: you practice. Mistakes are mine, successes are yours. And that's it. You're there to provide top cover. You say, this is where we're headed, and you do your work. You do it intelligently. You communicate with the team. You can't make a mistake frequently in this space because you learn and you improve and you continue to go forward. But mistakes are mine. That's really the biggest thing, I think. As in mine, as in the leadership, right? That's the top cover I'm talking about. Successes are yours, are the teams.
Absolutely. Erica, what about in your environment? Other challenges that you face and some of those cultural challenges, how do you create those environments that get to the results that everyone wants in a safe way?
I think, again, to Harrison's point, failure is not bad. With this new technology, this is really what's the opportunity space. And, some of the things you go after may not actually achieve the outcomes you had originally expected, and that's okay. Right? The point of this, and I think with the technology, because it moves so quickly and you can move out on these things rapidly, is, do a bunch of pilots or get your use cases together and you will have successes. This is not, you have one failure and the whole thing, it's tanking. This is, you have, a bunch of ideas and you can go after them. And I would say, be selective in the initial use cases that you go after, just to, for your leadership to learn and understand that there is a very important piece there as you're just getting started. But as the program grows, there are going to be some things that that don't work out. There might be automations that you may have developed and no longer are needed. Maybe it was a temporary solution. Maybe you didn't know something was around the corner, and now that was a lesson learned that you can bake into your program moving forward, so you don't do that, or you can avoid that from happening again. So I think there's a lot of things, but I would always say, if you're just getting started, beg, borrow, and steal from other groups. Talk to your counterparts. Join community of practices, consortiums. There's a lot of groups that have already done this in the federal government, and I think for us, that was critical when we were getting started 3 years ago, was reaching out to those types of groups. And everyone that I've dealt with, from people at the IRS and other agencies, everybody has been very willing and open to sharing, and that's been a big benefit, I think, and would be for new groups getting started as well.
That's great. And Carrie, from the VA perspective, you're part of the DevSecOps team, which is a transformational team across the environment. Any advice or lessons or practices around some of those challenges and cultural areas that you guys try to tackle?
Yeah, so we also look at failures or mistakes as opportunities to learn, and that's what's going to lead to innovation. Can't get it done right the first time, but then that leads you to be thinking out of the box and trying new solutions and new methods. And like Erica and Harrison said, that's why we choose the pilots. Is, okay, can we do this? Let's make it happen. And seeing that we can make it happen will lead to greater things and bigger use cases and bigger return on investment. But you have to try it first. And if you're not successful the first time, you think about it a different way and move on.
Well, I want to thank everyone. I think you guys have great perspective, practical advice, and have given our audience some interesting ways to approach their journeys. Everyone's on a little bit of an individual path here. And I'm sure people are going to reach out and ask you guys questions as follow-up. But I thank you for being open and sharing and being leaders and transformers in the spaces that you're in. And I sincerely appreciate you guys taking the time today. So thank you so much. And our last, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Medina. She's a colleague and friend and a director at Government CIO. And she will be talking to the Department of Labor, Krista Kennard, who is the Emerging Technology Branch Chief at Department of Labor. So thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Erin. I'm really excited to introduce our next guest here today. We have with us Krista Kennard, Chief of Emerging Technology at the U.S. Department of Labor. Krista has extensive experience as a data scientist. She's been a technical project lead in the private sector, designing and developing machine learning-based systems, and she has served as the Director of AI in a Center of Excellence at GSA. Krista, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
We're happy to have you here. To start things off today, I know the Department of Labor has a great RPA story. Can you tell us where the department started and how you got where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this is a story that I love telling, and I'm just so proud of the work that we've done over the last year and a half. This honestly all started out with a dream. So there's kind of two key pieces to the story. The first is that the Department of Labor's Chief Procurement Officer, Carl Campbell, he was doing his regular Chief Procurement Officer duties and learned that there are people starting to use bots in the procurement space. And being kind of the forward-leaning leader that he is, he thought, maybe this is something we can do at our department. And then in a parallel effort, our deputy CIO and our CIO, we're both starting to see the ecosystem in government where you are seeing people adopting automation and RPA to really see a lot of value in the way that they deliver on their missions. And so wearing their technical hat, right, and wearing their hat of, we run the office that supports the technical environment for this department. Let's look at this technology and see, do we want to make this available at an enterprise level? And so when those two groups got together, this RPA initiative was really born. We used Carl Campbell's idea of, can we use bots in the procurement space to really test out, what does RPA look like in the DOL ecosystem? Can we build this out? And really kind of the piece that made this happen was when I was at the Centers of Excellence, right? So when these conversations were happening, I didn't work for DOL. I was over at the Centers of Excellence. And so when our tech shop and our procurement shop got together and said, let's do this, let's ask the experts. And we brought in folks from the Centers of Excellence to build that out. This project was really born. That was about 1.5 years ago. And we have gone from asking the question, can bots, DOL agencies meet their mission, to saying yes, definitively yes. And we want to be able to support not just individual bots in production, but we really want to be able to support these bots at an enterprise level. And that's where we are today, 1.5 years. We've grown from our initial 3 pilot bots in the procurement space to having a growing ecosystem of bots. We have a number of bots in development now, and even more in our backlog. So I'm really excited, and actually, right at the end of all this, that's when DOL said, we have decided that this is something we want to invest in. This is something we want to sink some money in, and we don't want to just be looking at RPA. We want to repeat this with all new technologies that come out. Let's think about artificial intelligence. Let's think of the buzzword, right? We want to be a forward-leaning agency. We want to be using these technologies to really deliver on our mission. And so that's how the Emerging Technologies Group was born. And that's when they asked me to join. And since joining about 3 months ago, I'm really excited to see not only where our RPA initiatives are taking us, but also our other exploration of technology will go.
That's really cool, and certainly exciting for folks who are at DOL and are looking forward to these technologies. Can we talk a little bit more about how DOL is currently using RPA, and aside from procurement, do you have any good examples or successful?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I can absolutely speak to our procurement bots. We built 3 bots as part of our initial piloting. I will say some of those bots are more successful than others, but all 3 of them won the seal of approval. We're doing one for contractor responsibility determination. We are certainly not the first to do that in the federal space, but I think that the bot that we built is unique, and I think that it serves the need of our DOL procurement shop very well. And one of the things that it really inspired was building out of our bot center. So we have this really nice, slick environment where anybody who's using bots can come to a central space, see the bots that are available to them, and be able to access them and interact with them. And so now it's not just our procurement bots that exist in our bot center. We have bots for our Office of Human Resources. We have a number of different agencies looking at using RPA for automated regression testing of software that they have in their environment. We have agencies starting to look at how can we be using bots for automated reporting on performance, for evaluating claims, right? We're really just starting to see people get so excited about this. And so, for example, our HR bot, which was our kind of next endeavor into automation, we're able to build a very simple bot within the ecosystem we built in just 5 days. Whereas before it took us weeks and weeks to build the bot, we were able to do it so quickly. And that bot ended up saving over 72 hours of work and around $30,000 of labor hours, which is, I think, a huge benefit. And that was just a bot that we run annually. Imagine the capabilities that we're going to be able to have for more processes that aren't done annually, for processes that are run daily, weekly, monthly. So I'm really excited by the success that we've had with these bots, because I think we're only going to see more benefit to the mission areas.
That's really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my next question, but if you created a new bot in 5 days, you may be on the path to making this obsolete. So when an organization is looking at RPA, they have to make a lot of choices to stand up a new program, right? So where do they begin? Which processes do they tackle? How do you determine what are the good use cases for RPA?
Yeah, so I think that that's a really critical question. And I think that there's two sides of that coin. First of all, there is the technical aspect, right? And when we were looking at RPA as a capability, right, our CIO and our deputy CIO who championed this said, we need to make sure that this is technically feasible, that it interfaces with systems that we already have and makes it easy to bring in new systems, right? We do not want to be creating a technical architecture that is just impossible to manage, right? And then there's also the business perspective, right? Just because a bot or bots might be a solution to a problem doesn't mean that they can or should solve the problem. So in addition to building out technical infrastructure to be able to support the rapid building of bots from that engineering perspective, we are also establishing business structure around that. And so I think the answer to your question is, we're not just randomly looking at bots. We've actually set up a governance structure and some business level management around our RPA environment to be streamlining how we look at bots, right? So we've got things that we look at are, what is the buy-in of this level, right? Do you have championship from your leadership? Do you have championship from the users who are going to be interacting with this bot, right? We're not building bots for the sake of building bots, right? We are building bots to provide value to the employees and the workers of Department of Labor so that they can deliver on their missions. So we want to make sure we really are providing that value. The other thing that we're looking at is really, what is our return on investment, right? How many people are doing this process? How many hours are they spending on it? What are the challenges associated with that process? Because I think where we're really going to see a lot of bang for our buck on those automations is where they're hitting those key points, right? Reducing costs, reducing hours spent. And one of the things that I'll also add there is reducing risk. One of the big benefits we've seen from the bots we've already made, and actually something that a lot of folks are thinking about, is many times the processes we're looking to automate are performed differently by the wide variety of people who perform them, right? And sometimes there's risk in that manual process. And so by automating the process, maybe we're not saving time or money, but we are significantly reducing risk. And that is certainly something we like to consider. And then from a technical perspective, of course, we have to look at data sources. It does you no good if you can automate a process, but you can't interact with the data. And that could be because it is housed in a way that you can't access it. It could be that it still exists in paper. I will tell you, and I'm sure DOL is not the only one, there are absolutely processes at DOL that rely on Susie taking a piece of paper from the 3rd floor in her office to the 6th floor in somebody else's office. Unfortunately, that is not a process that can be automated by a bot, right? Maybe that means we change the process, right? But we really need to be thinking about what does that process look like? Because there may be manual parts of it that don't lend themselves to actual automation. So those are some of the criteria that we look at when we decide what is a good use case, what are things that we want to go forward with.
That's great. And it reminds me of a quote that I had written down that I found on a previous conversation that you'd had. You said, it's not just about the technology, it's about bringing that technology to the people and the missions that need it the most. So, you know, you addressed that a little bit in the previous answer, but I'm wondering, you know, how does an agency prepare and develop AI and RPA tools that successfully address specific problems and that people will use to address those problems instead of something that just adds to the IT load?
Yeah, I think that's not just a good question. I think that's the question, right? I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, right, we exist in an ecosystem where we need to be very cautious with the way that we spend our money and the way that we introduce new things into our environment. And I think that's good, right? As advocates and stewards of taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure that we are spending that in the most efficient way to deliver the most value to the people of this country. And I think what that means is we need to create a safe space for exploration. I think that one of the key things here when we're looking at AI and RPA tools is we need to be able to explore in a safe and controlled environment with gated decision-making capabilities. And so what I mean by that is even with RPA, which is a technology that we know well, or AI that we do know a lot about, even at DOL, somebody from the business is going to say, I have this business challenge and I think we can automate it. I think artificial intelligence is going to help us solve that problem. I'm going to look at it with my technical hat and say, maybe, right? And maybe is not what the government likes to hear, right? And they like to have very clear and defined yes, no answers. You either solve the problem, success, or you don't solve the problem, fail. And we got to get away from that mentality, right? So when one of our business units comes to us and says that, I say, maybe, let's look into it. But that doesn't mean, all right, doors open, go do whatever, right? We say, all right, we're going to evaluate for a lot of the things that I just looked at, right? What is the need? What does the ecosystem look like? What are the people involved? And how are we going to be able to leverage this tool, build this tool, implement this tool in such a way that it is going to create value? Right. I think taking that human-centered design approach to make sure we are creating things that build value is critical. And being able to say, all right, at this point in our assessment, do we think we should continue or not? Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is no, based on what we've learned. We have to be willing to make that no decision. And we have to paint that as still a success, right? Just because you don't take a product, especially a new technology, all the way to operations doesn't mean it's a failed product, right? We still learn, we still have this idea, and we still have the institutional knowledge to be able to go back to it if the circumstances change, right? And it's exciting when the answer is yes, because then you get to learn more, right? You get to try more things. You get to bring that human-centered design even farther to say, are we making sure we're delivering value? Having those critical points to be able to say, yes, this is meeting my definition of success. Yes, this is meeting my expectation. Yes, this is delivering value. Let's do it. But also evaluating for no is, I think, how we implement, right? You're not going to succeed on all of these. That's okay. Getting through just the discovery is a success. Getting through a pilot and saying we're not going to do more is still a success. Some getting to operations, still a success.
I love that. I'm totally leaning forward in my seat. So earlier you mentioned working with the procurement office on their bot center. How does that collaboration or that partnership factor into the implementation of RPA programs? And how do you handle organizational silos when you encounter this?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question. I've got a couple of, I'm going to tell a very specific story, but I think it's going to illustrate a broader point. So the way that we got to our bot center, that was not our original design for how this was going to work. So with our procurement bots, we had an initial idea of how all of our procurement professionals at DOL would interact with these bots. I, as a technologist, thought it was a great solution. As it turns out, our procurement professionals did not like that way to interact with it, which is fine. That is their prerogative, right? They have a lot of work to do that has nothing to do with caring that bots work or not, right? And so what we were actually able to do is learn from that experience and say, okay, we need to interact with you all in a much better way. And I think that what we experienced with our procurement professionals is representative of what we need to do more broadly, right? We need to be in partnership with them. We need to say, how is this working for you? Is this getting you what you need? No, let's change direction. And so what I'll say is, right, in this shared service environment that the Department of Labor is now finds themselves in with OCIO kind of serving all of the different component agencies that make up the Department of Labor, right? It's really about partnership. It's not about OCIO does this, my agency does this, procurement does this, benefits does this, right? We really need to be coming together as a community. And especially from my perspective in OCIO, right? I can take these lessons about interaction, about providing value from agency to agency, right? And it's more effective and it's cheaper to be able to optimize that interaction, right? What works for one agency will absolutely work for another agency, and that makes it better for everyone. So rather than thinking in this very one-off environment of, I want a bot just to solve my problem with a bot, thinking how is what we set up with our bot going to benefit the entire environment?
So I'm hearing you say that human-centric approach a couple times in a couple different ways, right? That's fantastic, and something definitely that we are embracing as an IT community, and we will continue to work at that. I wonder, what are some of the other lessons that you have learned from building an RPA program from the ground up?
So there's so many. What I will say is, and I am not an expert in security at all. I know enough about security to know that it is important, and that's about it. So what I did on day one, I went into our CISO's office. I said, Paul, we're going to do RPA. And he looked right at me and he said, what is RPA? But after a little bit of a conversation, I walked out of that office with him saying, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to give you a person. And we're going to figure out how security can support the building of your environment. And I think that lesson is important in a number of ways. One, security is important. Don't leave out your security team. You will have no platform without your security team. But two, that mentality of being able to explore something that you don't fully understand, knowing that you are going to learn along the way, is really important. And in fact, I think that's what drives success. And then the third part is, of course, our CISO is very high ranking. You gotta have championship from the top. And I know that I sound like a broken record. We always talk about it. But you really do have to have an owner. You have to have somebody who's willing to be the ambassador for your RPA program and say, this is what we're doing. We're here to support you. Let's work in this collaboratively, because you're not going to get to that human-centered design without it.
That's great. Those sound like great tips for pretty much any new program in the government. So back to RPA, it's still a nascent technology in the government. So from your perspective, what can you say is the value of implementing an RPA program, and how do people think about those benefits for their own organizations in making a decision?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. And what I always think about, right, I always bring it back to the mission, right? If you look at the way that the various different agencies that make DOL work, they all have different things that they're doing. Some of them are very unique and very niche, right? Like MSHA is going into mines and inspecting that, which is so cool, but also very different than what folks in Wage and Hour are doing, right? But if you think about the process behind delivery of this mission, I think you see a lot of commonality. And really what it is, it's about delivering value to those incremental pieces along your process chains, right? And so I don't think about it. I get so excited about technology. I would do technology for the sake of technology just because I'm a nerd. But the agencies, right, what they need to see are tangible benefits that help them do their jobs better, more efficiently, faster, right? And you got to tie it to that. You absolutely have to tie it to that, because if we're not streamlining processes, if we're not making it better and easier, what are we doing, right? And so I think that that's really the key when we look at kind of the benefits we're trying to expect out of this, right? It's about making your job easier, right? It's not about doing technology. It's not about evaluating legacy systems. Sure, that's all a huge part of it. But at the end of the day, it is about making me better at doing my job, right? And keeping that in mind helps us when we go to these conversations around, all right, well, you've got this system that has all these different data sources and all these different moving parts, and some places are held together with bubble gum and duct tape, and some places are these shiny new technology. All of that is incredibly important, right? But the way that we really get to the value is, all right, well, what does ripping off that duct tape and putting in some automation really do for you, right?
That's awesome. So in that context, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to for the future of RPA at DOL or across the federal government?
So I'm really excited so I'll answer that in two parts. Part one is what I'm excited about in the Department of Labor. The more I reach out to the different agencies that make up DOL, the more excited I get, because I hear the passion in the practitioners' voices when they think about, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to provide this type of benefit to the American people, or I'm trying to make sure that mines are safe. I'm trying to make sure that workplaces are safe, right? They're so passionate about the work that they do. And when I talk to them about automation and the benefits that it can bring, I think that there's so many opportunities. And even though we're a nascent program at DOL, I think over the next several years, we're just going to see this technology take off. And so when we think about it at a more government level, right, there are absolutely niche things that the federal government does. But I think that, again, if you look at those processes, some of them are very similar. In fact, some of them are. So what I'm really excited for across the federal government is, all right, now we've got a lot of different agencies starting to embrace RPA. We have a lot to learn from each other and a lot to share with each other, right? So I'm really looking at that next level of, all right, we're not just automating individual processes. We are taking government structure and providing the next level of automation across government.
I'm looking forward to that. So on that note, can you define a word that you have used, hyperautomation?
Hyperautomation, okay. I don't know if I said hyperautomation, but the way hyperautomation has been sold to me is kind of like what I was just talking about, right? We're not just looking at automating a process or automating a number of processes that work together. We are looking at an entire ecosystem of automation that is able to interact not only with itself and its own moving parts, but also other moving parts. And embedded within that is not just, I think, traditional rule-based automation, but you also start bringing in some intelligence to that automation. But I know there are many there are many vendors out there who may correct me on that. I welcome that discussion.
Oh, I'd love to hear a bunch of different definitions of it. Thank you so much, Krista. It was wonderful to have you here today, and I've taken a ton of notes. With that, I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Mike Hoffman.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Krista. Wonderful to learn even more about what great work Krista's doing over at Department of Labor. I know she did a lot with the AI Center of Excellence, so fantastic. So that concludes our event today. Wonderful to, again, have so many great speakers from so many agencies that are adopting RPA and really utilizing the different opportunities that it presents and really capitalize on those. Before we close, I did want to share and promote our next two events that are coming up. First and foremost, the Cyberscape Healthcare event on June 24th at 11 a.m. Looking forward to that one. And then one that I'm especially excited for is our first Women Tech Leaders event on July 22nd. That will also be at 11 a.m. Both of those are virtual events. I also wanted to mention that our events team is working hard on putting together plans for in-person events again. We're very excited to get that going, get our schedule going for 2022, but also the fall as well. I know a lot of folks are returning to the office, and there's interest for doing in-person events again, and we're excited to do that and be a part of it. So please, if you're interested in learning more about RPA, or if you missed any of the sessions earlier today, they're all going to be posted on our event page connected to this event. You can rewatch each of them. There'll also be articles connected to each of the sessions and more. So look forward to seeing you again on June 24th for our future event in Cyberscape. So look forward to seeing you then.